So a couple of years ago, I got asked a really interesting question, which was, what does the American center actually look like? Are voters really as polarized as we think, or is there a space in the middle that is being underserved? And at the time, the assumption was that the underserved middle kind of looked like a fiscally conservative, but maybe more socially progressive audience. And then a political scientist named Lee Drutman did a study where he asked people a couple of questions about their social views, a couple of questions about their economic views, and sort of plotted out where people fell on, a social conservatism axis and then an economic conservatism axis, and really found that there are a lot of Americans that don't take all of column A and all of column B. But to the extent that there are people who are heterodox, they're picking a little bit from both sides, they actually tend to be more socially conservative but fiscally progressive, as in they're
Hi, everyone. As you can tell, because it's only been a few minutes, this is just a preview of the full episode, which is over on the Raging Moderates YouTube channel. Hope that you'll pop over there and subscribe, of course. There should be a pop-up on your screen that you can click on to get there, youtube.com/@RagingModerates. And this is the place where you're also going to get all the extra content on top of the Wednesday, Friday pods. So come hang.
really alarmed about things like immigration. They maybe have more conservative views on things like crime, race, gender. But they are not interested in tax cuts for billionaires. They're not interested in slashing the federal government. They very much think that social safety net programs are important. And so coming out of that research, I wanted to, at my firm, Echelon Insights, do a similar study. And so over the last couple of years, we've been asking a battery of questions, 9 questions that are economic, 9 that are social. And we keep finding the same thing. That not only is there this big group in the center that sort of leans slightly more conservative on some social issues, but more open to a robust role for the federal government, but that group is actually growing by about 2 points every year that we've done this study. Now, the reason why I think this is so interesting is if you look at the number of our respondents who are on like the far right or the far left, it's pretty small. It's only about 13% in either of those categories. And that feels so different compared to what you see when you look at any data about how Congress behaves, where there's almost no cross-partisan voting, everybody's really in lockstep. You don't find a ton of members of Congress these days who embrace the idea that they are 70% aligned with conservatives, but 30% aligned with maybe the more, moderate or liberal folks on other issues. Like, you just don't find that in elected office. And it's so different from voters who, lots of them, are choosing a little from column A and a little from column B.
Yeah, I mean, not only do you not find a lot of them, when you do find them, they're being primaried because they've committed the cardinal sin of actually appealing to purple people, right? Like folks who do want a little of both parties.
Yes. And so we took our data and we did a cluster analysis that kind of put people into different political tribes. And we found that on the right, especially, the voters with the highest turnout propensity, the folks that are the most likely to be there in a primary, are absolutely the ones who sort of fall into that hard right quadrant or cluster. They are the ones who they are pretty straight down the row, conservative on everything, and pretty strongly so. Democrats don't have that dynamic quite as much. It's interesting that actually some of the highest propensity to turn out Democrats are not their furthest left folks. Like, there are lots of folks who are far to the left who are very loud online, but that is not the same as the folks who are the most reliable voters in a Democratic primary. And so I think that's part of why, Republicans in the 2010s went through this era of like candidates coming out of primaries that were like, a bit out there, where for Democrats, has not up till this point been as much of a question. You look at the 2020 primary where you had most of the candidates running aggressively to the left, and you had Joe Biden who kind of wasn't. And it turned out that your median Democratic primary voter was in support of him that year. So there is the primary electorate challenge is especially acute on the Republican side in terms of them being like pretty ideologically all in one camp, and there not being as much wiggle room in a primary.
I'm obviously, as a partisan myself on the left, thinking about the 2028 primary and how many very good analysts, especially in the polling space, like the Nate Silvers of the world and Galen Druk, are talking about AOC as the one who could emerge from our primary, that we might not see that tack to the center that we did in 2020. What do you think about those assessments?
So I actually do think that there is a combination of kind of populist rhetoric and media savvy that does have the potential to be really salient. And it is obviously the case that while Republicans have been the ones where our primary electorate is more sort of consumed by, folks who are more conservative, that dynamic absolutely could crop up on the Democratic side this time around. We are seeing, I see in things like the shutdown a lot of interesting photo negative parallels from the Tea Party era of the GOP, when Republicans were the ones saying, let's shut down the government until we get what we want. And so there's a chance that that dynamic could change. So I am still of the mind that somebody like AOC could win, but I don't think it's because she's really far out there on the left. I think it's because she's pretty media savvy. She has a good populist tone. And I think that goes a long way.
Taking into account, what you're seeing in your results and kind of the vibes right now from the Republican Party, what do you think 2028 looks like for them? Now, I'm caveating, let's say Donald Trump is not running for his unprecedented third term. Well, I shouldn't say unprecedented, illegal third term, since we used to say it's okay. But, I've been feeling like J.D. Vance, obviously the heir apparent, but that it's not a done deal, that a Marco Rubio wouldn't be interested, or that someone like a Pete Hegseth might be interested in trying to get in an open primary.
I think that to the extent Republicans get toward the end of Trump 2.0 and feel at least somewhat happy with what they've gotten, I think it'd be very, very, very challenging for someone to successfully challenge J.D. Vance. I think that he has his finger on the pulse of what that activist base really wants in a way that very few other figures do. I don't think that anybody owns Trump's base the way Donald Trump does. And I think a lot of people who have tried to claim they can have often failed. But I think back a lot to that vice presidential debate where it was J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz. And it was obviously very polarizing. Watching on my social media feeds, everybody obviously thinks their own side won. But the extent to which I saw so many conservatives saying, finally, someone who is articulating all of these things that Trump has kind of been saying, sometimes inartistically, but J.D. Vance is sort of doing it in a smoother way. And he has continued to try to be that person, lockstep with Trump, never diverging from him, but also, I think, trying to communicate in a slightly different fashion in a way that has seemed to resonate. And we see this in my data when I ask Republicans, who do you think will win the primary? I mean, J.D. Vance is so much further out there, certainly more so than on the Democratic side, Kamala Harris is right now, which is not to say that he couldn't be challenged. It's also the case that if you get past this midterm, if the midterm goes very badly for Republicans, and if for whatever reason Republican voters sort of conclude that maybe Trump 2.0 was not all that they had hoped it would be, and they, for whatever reason, are looking to turn the page, then seeing somebody else emerge is possible. But right now, Republicans are rock solid for Trump. They like what they're seeing. Even as they have anxieties around things like cost of living, they still think he's doing all the stuff that we wanted. And so it's hard right now to envision somebody making a break from that in a big way and succeeding in a primary.
Yeah. So you're saying Chris Christie doesn't have a chance in 2020?
I think in a Republican primary, he would meet significant challenges.
I want to talk about shutdown dynamics and that kind of rock solid support of Trump, because obviously you've seen his ratings on things like the economy, even on immigration, go down substantially. But that dissatisfaction has not transferred into support for Democrats, at least as a party. I mean, I think they're up on the generic ballot kind of between 3 and 6 points, depending on which pollster you're looking at. So what do you think is the state of play at the moment?
Yeah, right now, I think that Democrats are experiencing a lot of what Republicans experienced in the 2010s. So when I talk about the shutdown being this reverse photo negative and this dynamic of your party feels powerless, it feels leaderless, and you want to strike a blow. You want to say, we've put up a win. Look, we proved we fought. That feels very much like the dynamic that a Chuck Schumer or a Hakeem Jeffries is facing right now. And it's very similar to what John Boehner faced, over a decade ago. In the 2010s, Republicans tended to trail Democrats on the question of, which party do you feel favorable towards? And a lot of that was because Republicans hated their own party. People who identified as Republicans would say, well, I'm a Republican, but I'm unfavorable to the Republican Party, because to them it meant this establishment. And it was all kind of the warning signs that said this party is up for grabs, and somebody who's very much an outsider like Donald Trump can come in and take a hold. Which is not to say the exact same dynamic is happening now, but right now Republicans look better on those fave-unfave questions because Republicans like their party now. They're in a place where they feel like they're dominant, they feel like they're putting wins on the board, they feel like things are moving in their direction, and they like Donald Trump. And Democrats are more likely to say they feel unfavorably about their own party. So independents have for a long time been in a place where they say, I don't like either party. But part of what's making Democrats look so much worse is that lack of support from people who are ostensibly on their own side. But the other problem Democrats have, there was a CBS poll that came out a few days ago that asked about a bunch of different attributes. And it said, do you think of each party as being extreme? Do you think of each party as being strong? Do you think of each party as being effective? Well, Republicans were slightly more likely to be viewed as extreme relative to Democrats. They were also much more likely to be viewed as strong and effective. And so that, to me, is a big problem Democrats have, is that while voters right now may be looking at Republicans and looking at Trump and going, I wanted to secure the border. You might be going overboard. I didn't want this guy from my community who we really like to be deported. What's going on there? Or I wanted the economy to get a shakeup and for manufacturing to be brought home. I don't know that I love these tariffs that are going to make it more expensive for me to go Christmas shopping. Hang on, I have some notes about the execution. There is at least a sense that Trump is trying something. And I think if the question is somebody who tries something, even if it doesn't always work, versus a party where people go, I don't know what you would even try. I think that is what is keeping Republicans in the game in a moment where the party out of power usually has a great midterm election. I think it's not guaranteed for Democrats yet because it's still unclear what exactly their case will be besides we will stand in Trump's way.